As the Synganics Revolution continues, we're seeing a game-changing approach to plant nutrition, one that combines organic and synthetic inputs to improve plant health, optimize efficiency, and enhance workflow-controlled environments. A key focus to this panel is targeted foliar applications, an essential tool for nutrient delivery, integrated pest management, and best practices for pathogen prevention during room resets. By utilizing atomizing spray and fog solutions, cultivators can overcome nutrient uptake inconsistencies while boosting plant immunity with traditional agriculture solutions like Chitosan, calcium, Aminos, Kelps, and Silica. To maximize success, timing and precision matter. Applying foliar sprays up to day 18, 3 times per week with dedicated days for nutrients and IPM treatments. Scaling these solutions efficiently requires the right tools. That's where the Dramm Hydro Sprayer and Autofog come in, providing even coverage, reduced labor costs, and another cost-effective atomization for commercial operations. These tools also play a vital role in sanitation and room resets, ensuring pathogen control with less than 4 micron dry fog technology, getting in those tough-to-reach places in your grow room. This panel features experienced cultivators, manufacturers, and industry leaders in organic plant inputs. They'll share best practices, real-world applications, and cutting-edge solutions for foliar nutrition and IPM. Let's continue to turn up the terps. Welcome to the Synganics Foliar Panel.
The Synganics Solution Revolution continues. Inoculation in your root zone, foliar feeding, new spraying. We're doing it all. You've got some dope-ass tools up here. We've got some killers on stage. I'd like to welcome everybody to the stage. Mr. Mark Ervin with Green Grow, Kevin Crouch, Matt Trichome from PowrHouse.
What's up?
Amir from Hygrozyme, and Heather Norris from Natura. Round of applause, everybody, for our panelists. Now, as you know, we've had quite a few Synganic discussions over the past few months. This isn't by accident. We all understand that the market is compressing. There's things that you got to do to continue to step out of the norm of just regular salt packs. So part of that approach is focusing on plant health and immunity. Yes, an investment. There are things that you got to do to separate yourself. Now, ultimately, it comes back to workflow efficiencies, right? We're cultivating at scale. This is commercial cultivation, best practices, SOPs, and I really appreciate everybody up here coming up on stage because we're sharing these SOPs and best practices, lots of experience at scale in the California marketplace, in the Canadian marketplace, globally. We've got some very heavy hitters on stage today, so I'm very excited to have this discussion. As we continue to evolve, we start looking at ways to optimize workflow. Synganics is not an easy thing to do. It's not a plug and play. There's a lot of philosophy, there's a lot of methodology, there's a lot of tools that you should be investing into because again, nobody wants to hand water 2,000 lights. If you're in this business, you're trying to grow and you're scaling, you can have a 100 light operation, that's amazing. That's great, but we're also still trying to make sure that our workflow and our efficiencies are manageable. That's why we're going to be talking about a couple of tools that you see up here from Dramm, which have been a game changer when you start looking at application at scale and really just understanding the workflow efficiencies that you get from investing into the right tool to get the right job done. So this panel is going to be very free-flowing. I intentionally do not have slides. I've been wrapping my head around this. I was like, why am I going to create slides for a presentation where we can actually have much more deeper, in-depth uncovering of solutions as we start to nerd out and really dig into the details around Synganics and ultimately foliar spraying at scale. So I'm going to start off down here with Mr. Mark Ervin. And Mark, one of the things that I love the way you explain is Synganics. And if you could just talk about the basic relationship of organics and just mineral salt programs in general.
Yeah, of course. I mean, the idea of Synganics when we first started kind of theorizing this was just a way to improve the mimicry of nature, right? So in nature, people aren't fertilizing, they're not watering, and they're not providing additives or anything like that, and you're still getting a lot of really good growth if it's good soil. And the one thing that you can take away from that is that the microbes in the soil, the microbes in the system, the microbes in the ecosystem is what is feeding and providing all of the support the plant needs from natural, basically natural biostimulants, natural pathogen suppression in an environment if it's in balance, and then you have the natural way that microbes in the soil are working in concert. And it's not just one form of microbes in the soil, right? You have amoebas, protozoas, beneficial nematodes, beneficial mycorrhiza, beneficial bacteria. I mean, and all of them working in concert. And it took years and years and years to get to that perfect ecosystem. And so if we can bring some of that into a synthetic model where we're bringing microbes in to help smooth out the transitions and help increase terpenes, I think that's kind of the goal of what Synganics actually is.
Increasing the terps, turning up the terps. That's what we're here to do. Ultimately focusing on the solutions, right? There's a lot of products out there. How the hell do you know what to use? Well, we've simplified that for you guys. This whole idea of Synganics is really about finding the flowable, right, more water-soluble beneficials, and also knowing what to use and when. Because one of the cool things that we're doing with Kairos-based, Kevin, is measuring CFU counts. And shout out to Jeremy. If you haven't had a chance to talk to Jeremy, he's at the booth over there with Kairos-based. He's uncovering a lot of detail around the devil of CFU counts and microbes and overall just measurement of what we're putting in the plants and ultimately how it translates into quality. And what's the biggest thing that we're trying to do, Kev, is get bigger plant yields with better quality overall. So with that, Kevin, touch a little bit on the entire process of the Synganics approach with foliar feeding up to day 18, because if anybody scanned the QR code right there on the booth, or if you go to the Instagram handle of PowrHouse, it's all there. The recipe is fully there, fully transparent. Talk to us a little bit about the foliar program.
So I think if you're skeptical of Synganics, particularly in drip emitters, I think the easiest step is to foliar apply them, and you get an immediate plant reaction, and so it's a little simpler, a little cheaper. You're not going to use the volume of the material, whatever it is, and so I think that's the first step, and so depending on what route you want to go and what you're trying to apply, for me, I always like to build the calcium levels in the plant. So I have multiple calcium sources. My number one calcium source is green aminos, and it has two forms, a calcium oxide and a calcium carbonate. And so you build the calcium cells in the plant. You're going to build plant structure, aid against pathogens, and weather storms and things like that. It just builds up the plant, overall plant immunity. And so the green aminos is something I apply, and then you can that's my base, and you can build from there. I feel that product alone provides a good baseline for the Synganics. You have kelp, you have seaweed, you have aminos from protein hydrosalate, and so that basis, you just go from there, and you can add silicas, other calcium sources, microbial products like Biomind, which is what we also use, and it's a Bacillus streptomyces trichoderma blend, helps build plant immunity as well. So there's just a basic, easy way to apply Synganics through foliar is probably the first step, and then from there build on that through emitters and follow the process.
Yeah, no, let me just add to that a little bit. If we're talking about Synganics, I think people need to realize too, it's not just the biologicals, it's about the mineral concentration that you're missing from a synthetic program. Most people can admit that a synthetic program generally is not going to have 102 known trace minerals in the plant, right? Your synthetic programs might get you 10, 12, 15 trace minerals, but for terpene development and oil production, which is what we are oil farmers, we are not biomass farmers. If you want to be a biomass farmer, you can grow hemp, But 88 out of the 102 known trace minerals are in green aminos, and I'm not trying to sell it here today. I'm just trying to tell you, more minerals with more microbes feeding those minerals to the plant when they need them is what's going to produce a unique terpene fingerprint, and it's going to get higher concentrations of terpenes based upon the maximum expression that plant can have genetically.
Perfect. Yeah.
Well said. And Kevin, thank you for building on the basic blocks of the foliar program, because there are a lot of tools that we use in the root zone that also get applied in foliar, right? And this is, again, how do we simplify this process for you to take the recipe and apply it to your farm? Now, some of the things you're not going to see immediate results with. Chitosan is one of those moments that we started to recognize the magic happens if you build up that plant immunity. Amir, talk a little bit about the high shield and how the active ingredient of chitosan is something we should be learning more about.
Yeah, absolutely. As a manufacturer, I'm always biased towards talking about the story of coming up with a product. Usually, we always try to look at what is it that we're trying to achieve. And thereafter, we're going to look at the active ingredient that is going to help us get there. Well, Chitosan and the product High Shield is an exception for us, because when we learned about the active ingredient, we were like, oh my God, I don't believe in magic, but this is actually magic. It helps with the growth of the plant. It helps protecting the root zone. It acts as a natural biopesticide. It covers leaves with a thin film layer that, the plant is less prone to be attacked by pests and pathogens. And at the same time, it acts like a vaccine. So it tricks the plant to think it's been attacked, so the immune system is almost always on. So like from a product perspective, it's as natural as it gets. Although I have to say, making the product is actually pretty difficult. Why? Because it's a natural product. Dissolving the flakes of chitosan, which essentially comes from skeletons of crustaceans, which otherwise end up in a landfill, is actually pretty hard. You have to go through a very specific process of utilizing different types of organic acids to be able to melt them down. And then thereafter, when you want to push it through your stainless steel line to get to the filler lines, the viscosity is crazy. That's why initially we were thinking about doing a 3% of it, but then we were like, my God, this is too viscous. We can't even pump it through the lines. So we slowly started to bring it down to 1%, and that's the product that you guys are using. But the product, or any type of chitosan-based product that you see in the market, it's not a new technology. It's been studied since the 60s and 70s, and there are some evidences that it started 200-300 years ago in East Asia. So this product is amazing, and we've seen some really, really interesting results in it. One of the things that I'm really, really liking about this product is the fact that you end up losing a lot less transpiration. So if you're growing outdoor, applying it as a foliar, it's going to really help with preventing from transpiration. Obviously, California, with a lot of shortage of water and all sorts of issues, it's actually a very, very good product to use. On the other hand, it really helps with health of the plant by that triggering that immune system, which is has a name that I don't really remember.
SAR response.
Thank you. And we've seen a lot of great results with it. But to be honest, when we launched the product back in 2018, it took us a lot of time to educate people about it, because nobody was able to actually understand what it does. People are like, is it a pesticide? Well, yes and no. Is it a biostimulant? It kinda. Is it preventing transpiration? It does that too. So it took quite some time for us to be able to actually educate the market that, hey, this actually adds a lot of value. It increases the terpenes, it increases essential oils, you name it. That's why I said, the active ingredient for this product is actually magic.
And it was, chitosan was historically a product that was kind of not listed on bottles. So I think you're the only person that I know that actually advertises chitosan as a product. It's usually something that's kind of behind the scenes.
It's the actual main active ingredient for the product, and all the other inerts that are part of it basically are the inerts that help us to dilute it and make it into a liquid form. So and you've been using chitosan-based products for a very long time, but in the big ag, it's been used for many, many years and decades actually.
Yeah, they consider it a defense primer in big ag. So if you guys would look up that definition, defense priming is probably the easiest way to remember that. and it does everything that Amir's talking about. And Big Ag's been using it, I think, probably about 20 years or so, at least from this side of the world.
Yeah, it started from the 60s, and then from the early 70s, some of the big ag farms started using it.
And so when we start looking at different solutions to come into play, you're building plant health and immunity, right? You're investing into that plant, that cellular wall development with calcium and chitosan and all these solutions that go into the plant so that when we start increasing that VPD towards the end to ripen it and put it in that plant through senescence, it's going to get that health and that protection from not getting mold and mildew. So I think one of those things that, you know, as we continue to go down, and I'm glad that you brought up the 1% versus 4% chitosan, Amir. Viscosity is one of those things that we always have to touch on, because what are we looking at here? We're looking at a fogger that's less than 4 micron, and we invested into the stainless steel tip because if you use any oxidizing agents for room resets, you have to invest into that stainless steel tip. We've tried it a couple times.
You only get about 3 runs and it'll eat that tip.
It will eat the tip.
If I may add, usually more doesn't mean better. A lot of times we hear, well, this product has a higher percentage of active ingredient, and my answer is always, does it work? Like, for example, for beneficial micro products, there was I don't want to mention the name, but there was a product that was claiming that it has more than 1,000 different species of microbes. And I'm like, is it good? Are you saying, like, is it a good, like it is a good thing? It's actually not a good thing, because they're going to outcompete each other for food sources. None of them are actually going to work. So when it comes to beneficial microproducts, you got to go for the ones that are proven that actually bringing and adding value. And when it comes to high shield as well, if you go for percentages that are higher, not only it's going to get more viscous, but also it's going to bring your pH way too low, and you don't want that to happen.
Yeah, I like to add to that too, that a lot of products that are on the market that are being targeted towards cannabis growers, I think are predatory. And there's like these 1,000 different species of microbes. Number one, how do you RNA, DNA sequence that to show that that's actually happening? Because as a producer of micro products, I have to be transparent with the regulatory bodies across the world. I have to do an RNA, DNA sequence to show that those microbes are actually in there. And so you're not going to be at a chain of custody 1,000 microbes going into one thing, nor could you get the CFU counts you need to make it an effective product. So there's a limit. And there's also certain microbes that don't play well together, as Amir was saying, that we need to make sure that people aren't just trying to sell you something that's a powder that they're selling you for $100 a pound because you're a cannabis grower. And that happens a lot, because in the big ag world, they look at cannabis growers as, oh, they have money for some reason, when they're the ones like driving around in brand new trucks, like, nut farmers and a lot of different strawberry farmers. They actually make a lot of money comparatively to what we're doing right now, so.
We don't make much money these days. I don't think anybody does.
Heather, I'd love to tap into you on this question, because you at Natura, doing the head of R&D, you get to play around with a whole lot of things, a lot of different solutions. And actually, before I even ask you the question, touch a little bit on Natura and the environment and the overall, just the process of what you guys are doing over there, because it is magnitude when you see it.
Okay, so Natura is an 11-acre campus. It's about 200,000 square feet of flowering canopy space. So we have 17 bays in all. 15 of them hold just flower, 2 of them are veg, and 1's conditioning. So in the flower bays, we hold anywhere between 8,000 to 10,000 plants. We load and harvest every 3 or 4 days. So we'll harvest, and then the next day that's getting loaded. And then 3 days later, 4 days later, we're harvesting. And then that gets loaded again the next day. So perpetual harvest cycle. We're consistently moving parts. Everything is on a rolling table system. So we start out in the conditioning area. You want to lower VPD. You want to harden off all of your plants. You want them to not be having so much transpiration and water loss, because they don't have a lot of roots. They're not uptaking a lot at that point. As they move through the veg stages, we increase our DLI. We increase our VPD. Thanks, Serge. We increase our VPD, so it's getting a little bit drier, a little bit more light. And then by the time they get ready to go into flower, we've basically acclimated them to where they're ready to take on that drier environment and that highlight environment. We've done a lot of R&D over the last few years. I've been in the director of R&D position for about a year now, and meeting these guys has been completely a game changer. You know, all these products that they're talking about, I've done R&D myself, and it's definitely a game changer for the cannabis industry. The best thing that I have as a takeaway for what these guys said is you want to inoculate your plants as early as possible. So the first time that you touch them, the first time that you drench them, you want to give them, you know, a beneficial trichoderma, like he was saying, bacillus, and some type of a silica, right? You want to build your cell walls early on, and you want to build up that rhizosphere so that it's colonizing the bacillus, it's colonizing the trichoderma so that you're battling any pathogens that could potentially come in your media or water molds that could be living in your irrigation lines. So that'll help you, you know, with fusarium. That'll help you with pythium. And once you build that up, you're essentially building that backbone for your plant for the rest of the life cycle. So.
Incredible facility you guys have. I mean, it really is a machine.
Yeah.
So being able to find the right solutions, of course, you've tried it all, right? And a lot of the different things that we start talking about is, well, why does it work? And this kind of comes back to what Mark and Amir were talking about, is the vetting process, right? There's only certain strains, or there's certain microbes that are going to be high EC tolerant, right? There's a lot of things that we are doing as crop steering has become such a regular norm in cultivation, right? We know that we are measuring, we're stacking our EC, and we're really monitoring that root zone specifically to make sure that we don't overdo it with the osmotic pressure, right? We want to make sure it's cleaning and keeping our rhizosphere alive, which is, again, I know that we're not going to talk about root zone too much today, but the high clean is one of those solutions. Again, we keep talking about how do you keep your drip lines clean, right? Well, there's organic line cleaners like a high clean, which is a citric acid base. It's not hypochlorous acid. It's not going to kill off your microbes. And those are the type of solutions that if we start to understand the purpose behind the process of why it's doing that, and we can start cutting out these other things that are not going to kill off our investments. That's, again, we're investing into something like these tools. And Kevin, I'm going to touch briefly on a couple of the highlights of the Dramm Hydra, because this is something that is incredibly workflow efficient. I have the pleasure of working with this thing as well. And when you start off with the regular backpack sprayer, or just like a larger droplet type of sprayer, night and day difference when you start to use an atomized, pressurized sprayer like this. Touch a little bit about, on this pressure.
Yeah, it is a game changer, especially if you operate a decent sized facility. I wouldn't even say a large facility, because you'll save money in the labor it takes to spray a room if you have a sprayer like this, and so you get much better coverage. It is a lower micron than your standard backpack sprayer, so it takes less passes to get a good coverage on the leaf. So, when it comes to labor and you have to spend time on shooting the under canopy and such, it's a little more efficient, and it's dialable. So there's been cases, operating a double stacked facility, and I'm just doing a foliar application, and I'm spraying from one rack, 2 racks over. With this, and it's just because you can kind of dial it in. Now I'm not getting the coverage underneath, like you would in an IPM, but if I'm trying to put something like green aminos or another sort of biostimulant product, I can spray and get good coverage from a far distance, and you can't typically do that with a paint sprayer or a backpack sprayer. So it's an effective, efficient tool for commercial application.
100%. So Heather, talk a little bit more about that, because again, 11 acres is insane. Like
200,000 square feet. So we use the Dramm Hydra also. We have a badass IPM team, and it's used for mainly everything that we do that is a foliar that touches the plant, whether it's a IPM strategy, we're using some type of mineral oil, or it's a foliar spray. Like Kev was saying, you want to inoculate that root zone in the beginning and then rely on your foliar sprays a little bit later, right? We also use that just the fogger over here, right? Very important for room turnover if you want to sanitize your entire room, running something like a peroxyacetic acid and a hydrogen peroxide through that, right? Also, the beneficials. You could run the green aminos through that. You can run your calmino or your nitroamino. Like Green Grow's got a bunch of badass products that we've seen work firsthand, so.
Yeah, and To add to that for like best practices, and I'm sure you could talk about it too, is that when you're doing rotational spraying, you just need to make sure that you are cleaning out your system between each thing, depending on what you're using. So like if you're doing a periacetic acid or you're doing, H2O2 or something like that, you got to clean out the system before you'd go back in with a biological. And sometimes people ask me questions, and it's a very common question, is can they also mix a biological with other types of IPM products? And I say, yes, but like if it's an oil-based pesticide, or if there's other types of compounds in that pesticide, you cannot combine it with biopesticides. So just best practices to keep an eye out for.
Yeah, and we tend to see that the best practices are to kind of alternate that. If you have to go to like an oil type of drench, you definitely want to come through with some type of enzymatic product, such as the hygrozyme or something like that, right? It's going to eat all that decaying root material that maybe happened from your oil drench and make it more available to the plant. And then you're going to be able to come back and re-inoculate that root zone with something else to proliferate your rhizosphere again. So completely agree with that.
I'm glad you brought that up, because we're building a life cycle, right? You're incorporating, you're inoculating microbes, you're creating life. How do you keep the life alive? Well, an enzymatic product like hygrozyme, it's going to it's going to convert the decaying root zone matter into food for the microbes. So you're just basically keeping the cycle alive. And that's, again, one of the things that we're touching on, is why the recipe is curated to the way it is right now, because it's an evolving thing, and solutions, innovations are going to continue to come out, focusing on workflow.
Yeah, I think we should talk too about like when people are doing rotational spraying, make sure that if you did do a spray in a room that was to target something, or maybe you had to do some type of quick, like a xerotol or something like that kind of spray, you're going to have to go back in at some point in a day or two to re-inoculate, because the xerotol is going to knock down canopy dwelling microbes. And so you just need to make sure that you have that in your protocol or in your SOP, that you did something like a xerotol, now you're moving to a biological spray within probably 48 hours or less.
Even best practices would be you get your xerotol, like you said, sterilize that room, no pathogens. Then you come in with whatever preventative measures you're going to use for your pests. And then you come in and you do your inoculation one, and you kind of rotate on that. And that's how you're just going to keep everything clean, then pest-free, so pathogen-free, pest-free, and then you're getting your biologicals in there and your biostimulants.
And obviously that's for the root zone too. If you're going to shock your roots, with the product, you have to come back in and re-inoculate it, within 24 hours, 48 hours or so.
And that's almost the difference between like sterile and then holistic, right? Like in the industry, that's like big pharma versus cannabis, right?
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
One thing though that I'm sure Kevin can speak a lot more about it is that when you introduce strong industrial sprayers like Dramm, then you got to really be careful about the amount of product you're actually applying. Because, like for example, if we're saying that our biopesticide HydroPunch, if we're saying don't go beyond 2%, and then you put it into industrial spray and you spray the heck out of that oil-based product on the plant, then you're going to have problems. So I think understanding how the industrial sprayer works, it plays a really big role in making sure that nothing really gets into problem.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a good point. If you're using a pump sprayer, backpack sprayer, you could probably go, 60, 90 mils of a product, where if you have something like this, you might be down to 30 to 45 to get the same coverage and effectiveness.
That's a great point. So we're focused on workflow efficiencies, cost savings. While we're investing more into the plant, we also be mindful about the type of tools we're using, because again, the concentration level is going to probably require you to use a little bit less. Just be mindful about that. Spray in a certain area, test it before you actually go and blast your entire room. So I know one of the funny things that I love seeing Kevin do is, like, if there's any sort of pest pressure, he loves to let it kind of like brew up, and like he'll target that. And if we harvest a room, he'll leave some plants just to test some stuff out. So
yeah, it's the only way you learn, so you always push it. And so it's challenges, and specifically pest pressure has always been something that I've enjoyed,
for sure.
Killing things, I guess.
Kevin's challenge right now is thrips. He loves getting rid of thrips.
Yeah, if you get plants from nurseries, probably in any state, California, typically you get thrips, and I'm like, oh man, I see it almost every time I get plants, and it's not a difficult problem to get rid of. You just have to have the right solution and understand the thrips life cycle to be able to beat it.
Drop a little game real quick, Kevin, because thrips are a major consistent nuisance. So what is your solution to get rid of thrips?
So I incorporate azadirachtin. It's pretty basic. It's a product that you can get here, and it's an anti-molt, so it restricts the life stage phase change. So thrips have two different stages of life. So when they're in the soil, you're going to spray the canopy, and then you're not going to do anything to the larval stage down below, and so the azadirachtin will affect that adult when they chew on the leaf to be able to not molt and not change that life phase to be able to get to that next phase. So it's without azadirachtin, and you're just spraying any sort of horticultural oil, pyganic, any sort of just general pesticide, you're going to still have thrips. There's no way around it. I mean, obviously there's other ways, beneficial insects too, but on a spray schedule, azadirachtin will do it.
Which is exactly why you've got the azadirachtin product in the 3-week cycle during the 3-week sprays.
Yeah. It's I do it weekly, and really we don't battle anything but really gnats generally, and so I still keep it in there because thrips are always. They're typically around, but very minimal. And for us, I challenge people to try to find thrips in the flower room.
100%. So with that, let's just touch real quick, because at PowrHouse we're using a 3-spray rotation up to day 18, so 3 times per week. So in flower, we're going nutrient foliar spray number 1 on Mondays. On Wednesdays, we've got an IPM spray, which is featuring the Hygro Punch by Hygrozyme, which is a horticultural oil. Love the smell of it, by the way. It smells like cinnamon gum. It's delicious. And the azadirachtin as well, right?
Yeah, and like Mark said, the rotation, I tend to keep my IPM spray separate. They're my biological biopesticides. Some people will put them together. So the middle ground is is the IPM, and then my Monday, Friday, and then that spray schedule, just as like commercial cultivation, allows a lot of flexibility. So sometimes something happens on a Monday, and you're like, oh shit, I didn't get to my spray. Well, you have Tuesday,
right.
And so you have a lot of flexibility on a Monday, Wednesday schedule.
I love it.
Monday, Wednesday, Friday.
So you've got your nutrient foliar sprays on Mondays and Fridays, and your Wednesdays are your IPM. So leaves a lot of room for flexibility, and I love that. So let's touch briefly, if you guys are okay, I would love to just show a quick demonstration of the Dramm Hydra and the Auto Fog. Kevin, if I can call on you real quick, please, because guys, it's really impressive that we wanted to make sure not just to talk about it, we want to be about it and show you guys what's cracking over here.
If you've ever operated one, you probably are pretty familiar with this, but
I'll let you roll it out real quick. I'll let him roll it out, and then I'll give him the mic right afterwards.
it's really heavy, by the way. You get an arm workout by not only the cart, but also just the sprayer, because this probably weighs a half a pound or so. So if you're spraying for 2 hours, you're going to get a workout. So
I can't be in front of the speaker. Great.
You're not going to apply IPM on us, right?
there is residual hydro punch in here too. So the whole room's going to smell like cinnamon.
Yeah.
So whenever you turn it on, you always want it on start. And so, well, let me back up. First, when you mix any sprayer, my SOP is I typically whatever your total spray volume is, I go half with water, and then any product I put in here is a diluted solution of it. I'm not just pouring 30 mils of hydro punch in here. I'm diluting that in a gallon jug or a gallon pitcher and then pouring it in. And when you're doing that, the reason why I start at half is because when you turn this on, this has a whole mixing unit in here that mixes the sprayer. So while you're putting it in, it's going to mix it. And if you just throw it straight in as an undiluted concentrate, it's going to pick it up in this filter. So that's typically why I do that. So.
All right, so Kev's going to fire it up.
So the noise you hear is it actually circulating. And so this It's super powerful. You can almost operate it as a pressure washer. That's the level that this thing comes out at. So it's on start, and it'll actually spray on start. You just don't get a significant volume out of it. So it has a number system, 10, 15, 30, 45, and the higher you go, the more volume it gets. And then this dial right here, it just changes the spread, narrow or wide. And so I normally operate at about 15 is typically, if you're spraying clones, you might want to be on start because you don't want to, I mean, this thing's power enough. If you operate it at 45 and you're spraying clones, you will just chop them all off. That's how strong this thing is. So I typically go somewhere between start and 15. And then if I am trying to spray something 10 feet away, I might go up to 30 or 45 and spray that.
Which is important to note because if you're operating in that double stack, you're already up on that second tier and you want enough pressure to get to that next row over for efficiency purposes, that's important to really trial that pressure from 10, 15, 25, and so on. Go ahead, Kev. Let her rip. So as you can see, he's got the jet stream.
Step out there. Step forward.
Where do you want?
That's at 15.
That was at 15, jet stream. Kev's cranking it up to... What pressure are you on, Kev? That's the highest. So you can see how fine the droplets are, and you can see that's the amount of coverage that you're going to get. So the more fine droplet size, the more coverage you're going to get on there. There's a lock on it that you can adjust, and that way you don't have to have hand fatigue, so you can clamp it in the position that you want, and you can be efficient. Make it rain, Kev. Guys, I just want to say we've been talking about this for years. This is amazing that we're spraying inside an indoor sun. Sorry, Kev. Yes, he does. Watching Kevin with the sprayer is an amazing moment. Now let's jam over to the auto fog real quick, Kev. Thank you for showing us that.
It is noisy, so you probably want hearing protection. However, when you're down the row, you're going to be far away from it. So,
Great point. Eye protection, ear protection. Now let's jam over to the auto fog for a moment. Which again, this is a dry fog. I have to stand over here. This is a dry fog unit that I believe the cover, I don't have the specs off the top of my head, but it's how many thousand cubic square feet, Kev, off the top? What is it, like 25,000?
So you can do any indoor cannabis facility. It's gonna, it's way undersized. This is meant for greenhouses. So it's done. The products you put in is done based on a concentration and a percentage of the square footage and leaf coverage. So generally, like say you're going to put 30 mils of a product in this. This is not the same. You're not putting 30 mils in here. It's based on a low and a high rate, which is a 30% or a 20%. And it's also based on what it would take to cover that room. So say like a double stacked 130 light facility, I'd go through 100 gallons in an IPM spray in that. So that 100 gallons, you would put, say, you're putting a calcium product in there and it's 30 mils a gallon. So you're going to base that on the 100 gallon ratio. So 100 gallons times 30. So you're at 3,000. That's what you should put in that product. And based on the coverage you want, you subtract from there a percentage, 20%, 30%, depending on high coverage or low coverage. It's kind of complicated. And so from that's the product you put in there. And then and that's based on a square footage, 10,000 square feet. So 10,000 square feet at 3,000, 20% of 3,000, that's 600 mils. So if I were to spray that same facility, I'm going to take 3,000 mils of a product, and now I can reduce that down to 600. And then that's at a 10,000 square foot. If you're only operating 2,000, you can reduce it even more. So now you're getting into 100 mils, 200 mils of a product that if you were operating that, you would be spending a lot more money. So, and that's the benefit of this is you basically, that small micron size, it has a much better plant uptake. So the plant's going to utilize it better. So you don't need the same ratio as you would in that.
Fun fact, the size of the plant stomata is about 7 micron. This is a 4 or less micron size. So like Kevin said, the smaller the particle, it'll be able to go into the plant stomata. And Kevin's going to go blast over here.
Yeah, there's no extension. There's water in here. If I plug this in and the timer's on.
I'm right in the line of fire. Let me get out of here.
Yeah, you are.
Hold on.
So, the first time I ever used one of these, I used it with the lights off, and I blasted it, and I was like, I can't see anything. This is a dry fog, by the way. It's if you put your hand up close, you'll see it is wet. But when you get further out, the micron size actually takes shape. It expands and it goes in the air, so it's really dry. And so I was like, I don't think this thing's working. And so I was talking to the Dramm rep, and he's like, dude, go get a laser. And so I operated. Next time I had water in there, and I went into the grow room, and I turned a laser on in there, and it was like the disco. It was just like you saw it refracted all the light. I was like, oh shit, it is working.
I've got a picture of that, which I'll pull up on the screen here in a moment, but it really is cool because it doesn't look like it's affected, but it's completely covered, which again, for room resets, no aspergillus. It'll get into every single part of the room, every crevice. So again, not just for foliar applications of plant nutrition and IPM, but for room resets, again, pathogen prevention, guys. Like that's what this thing's about.
Yeah, that's probably what I use this and I should say I rely on this the most is for room resets because it's I can't remember the retail cost of it. It's like $3 or $4 grand, so it's not cheap. But the price of remediating pounds with aspergillus is going to be much higher than that. And then, it's a one-time purchase. And the PAA product, I use PAA, periacetic acid, like a Sanidate or something similar, clear line here, that you can use. And that product is so cheap that, that the investment of this will pay for itself, pretty quick.
Cool. Fire up, Kev. So as you can see, it's starting to disperse. It's pumping. And this is, I believe, an 8-liter jug. Is that right, Kev?
Yeah. And I've never put more than 2 liters in it because I don't have any grow rooms that are 10,000 square feet or bigger. So that's what this is meant for. So I usually use about 1 liter.
You can see his hand getting completely covered. It's still getting completely covered when he's about 10 feet away. But the coverage is insane. So, Kev, how long do you leave this on during a foliar application?
So there is complications with using this. I shouldn't say complications. SOPs you have to follow. And in an indoor environment, because the micron size is so small, you really need to be able to turn off your HVAC system or stage it appropriately. So say you're doing a reset, which is what I use it mostly for. So if you're using it on a reset, you have your HVAC on. I'm gonna start this thing off with the HVAC on, but you don't want to leave it on the whole time. First off, it's gonna filter out all the product, and it's gonna get caught in the HVAC filters, and it's gonna get them wet because it's gonna condense that micron size, and you're gonna have wet filters. So I leave it on for 10-15 minutes to sanitize the ductwork, and then I shut off my HVAC. And then after that, you have your dehues, and if you have controls, it makes it a lot easier. I'll run the dehues for say 10, 15 minutes and then let them get sanitized, then shut them off. And the same kind of goes with all your system, your fans and whatnot, whatever you have in there. And then I leave the last half an hour, hour and, half an hour to an hour, and just let it build up in the room and let it get every nook and cranny everywhere. And it'll get under your tables, it gets everywhere. So, and then I just let it hold there. And then, typically overnight, because if you're putting like a PAA product in here, you can't be in the room. This is something, it's a set and forget. So it has a built-in timer. So you're going to set it to the timer or click the timer and then get out of the room. And so, and I usually make sure that, you have signs on the door, you have, something underneath the door if you don't have a good door sweep, because it'll get into your common areas and you'll smell it. So typically with a room reset, I do it at night when nobody's there, and I just try to make sure that it's safe for, you do not want to be in that on something like, if you're doing a calcium-based green aminos, biomin, a chitosan, things like that, you're not, the health risk, obviously you're going to breathe it in, but it's not going to kill you. But I still tend to, limit human exposure when I'm in there. So I'll set it off, kind of the same process. In that case, I turn off the HVAC like at the same time I'm turning this thing on. So I immediately turn it off and then try to limit as much fan movement as you can, and then let it blast. And 30 minutes, 45 minutes in a small room, say 1,000, 2,000 square foot room, that's all you really need to get good coverage. And then you'll let it run for maybe another half an hour. Let it build, let it just kind of be stagnant in the room for a half an hour, make sure it's coverage, and flip on your HVAC, and then it'll end up getting filtered out on its own. Or if you have charcoals, throw in your charcoal and it'll filter it out.
A lot of great tips and tricks there, Kevin. Thank you for that breakdown of these SOPs, because again, this is a very industrial tool, right? Dramm is an industrial company, so when you start looking at equipment that you invest into, different solutions that you're putting your money into, ROI comes very fast especially when you start talking about how much time it's saving and how many employees you can put onto other more important tasks in cultivation. So appreciate that, Kev. Thank you. I would like to open up to Q&A, and we'll just start with the audience. Is there any questions or any points of clarification that we would like to cover? The machines, the Dramm machine, you can buy those here at Indoor Sun Hydro. They're stocked. So yes, Dramm, here, we're good to go. My man, here, I'm going to come over here for you guys. Name and where you're from, sir.
My name is Hezzy, from San Francisco, from Herbs and Spice. So I had a question. As you used that machine and it settles, does it leave residue? Like, meaning if it sprays on trays or walls, does it leave a residue? I mean, if it's not filtered through?
Yeah, depending on the product, yes. With something like that, you don't really want to use like an oil, which will typically what we'll cover, because that's a suffocant. So it's more of a biostimulant, microbial, NPK type product that you'd put in there. And a lot of times those won't really have a residue. You have to be careful with products like Regalia. I don't know if you guys ever use Regalia. I experimented with that one of the first times because I do spray Regalia, and the whole room looked like a murder scene. Regalia is like bright red, and my whole staging and turning off the HVAC just looked like somebody went right through the HVAC unit. It was like red everywhere. Ducks, came in, and I did it at night and with the lights off, so I didn't really see what was there until the next morning when all the lights came on, because I had a green headlamp, and I was like, oh shit, this is bad. And it took like half a day of cleaning up the mess. So yes, it can leave a residue. So I would not put Regalia through the autofog.
Great question. Thank you, sir. I don't know how I can go. Yeah, you have to meet me over here. Name and where you're from, sir.
Anderson from the Bay Area. The Synganic programs in Rockwell only substrate. How much of your substrate affects your Synganic program?
Well, yeah. So you can still do a lot of good work with rock wool by impregnating the rock wool with microbes. So there's a couple phased approach, but the first thing you want to do is when you are rehydrating the rock wool, you want to inoculate that water that you're using to rehydrate the rock wool at the first step. So typically what we do is we'll do a green aminos water with like Biomen, maybe an all-in-one, and that will be like the water that we're using to rehydrate in our rooms. And then as we kind of move on to the next stages, anytime you're going to hydrate like a larger size cube, you're going to do the same type of thing, so that you have every square inch of that area covered with millions of CFUs.
And I think, I know you've told me this before too, that a lot of the microbes that are in these products are used to being in a high aqueous solution. And so in the rock wool and the higher holding capacity and kind of perpetuate to have more water, it doesn't really affect it.
Yeah.
Great question, because that's one of the biggest questions that we come across is substrates and Synganics and inoculations. And what products can you actually use? Does rock wool work? Yes, absolutely. Kevin, you were doing it for years in a double stack LED, and it definitely works. Just about how many times you have to re-inoculate, and again, how much more food you have to give it, when you give it more. So it's a circle of life.
And I think it's important to note that like if you are using rock wool and you're doing kind of a high EC environment, you're going to have to probably add more microbes more frequently, and then you're going to notice when you do that, you're probably going to pull back on that EC maybe 10-15%.
Kevin's going to increase his lights and say, send it. Great question. Thank you. What other questions do we have? Questions for the panelists amongst each other. What comes to mind when you're thinking foliars? What are the key takeaways? Because every panel we get into, there's a purpose, a process, and a payoff. I'm going to start with the purpose of this. We want to recognize that Synganics is about root zone inoculation, building up that rhizosphere, and also foliar spraying. So
maximizing the genetic potential is ultimately what it is.
Yeah.
By elevating trace mineral counts, getting the terpenes higher, with the having higher plant immunity. So if you're, the Synganics, it's really, as a grower, you're going to have all these obstacles that happen. And if you could have those building blocks and have everything as perfect as possible in that plant, your ups and downs on a run are going to be much less.
Yeah, I mean, we can probably refresh the crowd about terpenes and like what they are and why they're there. So terpenes are a biochemical signaling language, and they're used for many things, but they're also used to communicate with other life forms, right? So as a human, you're going to smell that orange, and you're going to go over to it and go, oh, wow, that smells good. But like for a microbe, the terpenes will attract microbes in nature, and also it will attract micro and macrobiotic life. So if you are in a sterile environment and with no one to talk to, you're probably going to be, your speech is going to be impaired, right? So with terpenes, if we want more expression of genetic potential of that plant, if we want more terpenes in more diverse languages like English, Spanish, German, French, right? You're going to need to have different microbes, that are going to help push that expression further. So if you're going to grow in a salt environment that's sterile, you're always going to have cardboard terps. It's the way it is.
Even visually, it's very, very visible when you have a flower or when you have crops grown with just sterile system and just salts only versus something that has some biological in it, or they added some beneficial microbes or other things. Even visually, it's visible. So I don't think there is any question about which one has higher quality.
Yeah, and I mean, I think a lot of times it brings people back to like homegrown, right? So do you want to buy a mass-produced tomato that was picked before it was ripe and put on the store shelf, or does it taste better when you grow it in your own garden? It doesn't taste just better because you grow it in your own garden because you picked it later. It also is better because you use good soil, good fertilizer, you grew it yourself, you picked it when it needed to be picked, So the same thing is true with cannabis. I mean, you can produce cannabis in the same exact way that they do hothouse tomatoes if you really want to. But we're not growing again for biomass. We're growing for terpenes and oil. We're oil farmers. So to mass produce terpenes and oil, you need to put the signaling languages together. You need to put the things that are going to trigger those terpene releases, and you pretty much have biostimulants and microbes.
And I think I'd like to add that, a question might come in that, okay, what's in it for me? But at the end of the day, it comes down to, do you want to produce a Toyota or do you want to produce a Ferrari? Well, you have to put more efforts into making a Ferrari, but at the end of the day, you can sell it at a much higher price. So I don't think there is any right or wrong here, but it comes down to what's your target? What type of crops do you want to produce? What type of reputation are you looking for? Are you looking for a high quality crop? You're going to produce the best type of flower you can, or you just want to produce something that's end up in processing. So there is a place for every type of growing methodology, in my opinion, but it totally depends on what you're trying to achieve.
So like Amir said, you can visually see that these products work, right? You can visually see the plant health increase. You can test your flower, send it out for COAs, see a high terpene. You can see high THC, right? But for our nursery guys, how do they know that it's working? Right, that's something that we haven't touched on. So on the R&D side, there's a lot of tests that can be done. You can do leaf tissue analysis and see what's going on inside the plant, right? You can send out your media samples, and you can do CFU plating and see what's happening in your rhizosphere around your roots. That's just a couple things that I like to do and make sure that what we're doing is working. The plants, phenotypically, they'll tell you, but also what's happening inside the tissue and the vascular system. We're not a mind reader, we can't see inside the plants. So that's the best way to know, yeah, this is working. I'm having a lower bacterial load of bad bacteria. I'm having a high amount of beneficial bacteria using these biostimulants, and I'm seeing increased plant response. You can just see by using certain products like mono or ortho silica, you'll physically see your stalks getting better, but when you cut that open, you can see your solid pith instead of having almost like a straw through the middle, right? So things like that, like always validate what you're seeing scientifically.
And I'd love to touch on that, Heather, because you've trialed so many different products, right? Having that large of a campus, you get a lot of opportunity to try a bunch of different solutions. So talk to us a little bit about that methodology, which you just touched on around, hey, you can physically see this product working. Maybe we're going to start a little bit more in veg. Maybe we'll put it in the indoor spot, whatever it looks like. But what are some key things that you can quantify to measure to start looking at something actually going into rotation? Because it's not just a minor increase in cost. Like, this is a significant increase to your overall production value, and you have to justify that. Talk to us a little bit about that process.
I mean, we definitely do like media saturation, the SME, and we'll actually see what's happening in the media. We'll send that out for testing. You want to do tissue analysis. There's some on-site machines that you can buy. I'm not going to plug anybody, but you can do on-site tissue analysis. There's plenty of labs that'll do it outside as well. One of the things that could really help identify if your plants are in the right environment, if they're photosynthesizing and transpiring at an effective rate, you can get what's called a pyrometer. And a pyrometer essentially will measure your stomatal conductance and how active your stomata are in its gas exchange. So that's something that is very little known in the industry. It's more of like a big ag thing. Went to UC Davis, so it's something that I used a lot back in my college days. And I see how it could be used more in the cannabis industry, right? So you're measuring the CO2 gas exchange that's happening. There's an enzyme called rubisco that binds to the carbon and makes it more available to the plant as like a sugar and like a ATP, right? So the stomatal conductance, it'll tell you, do you have the right VPD? If your VPD is too low, your stomata are going to close. Do you have the right temperature? If your temperature is too high, your stomata are going to close. That sets you back however many days in your growth cycle, because essentially they're just in suspended animation. They're not doing anything. They're not transpiring. They're not photosynthesizing. They're just chilling.
I will plug Arroyo because I've had their leaf pyrometer and that thing is dope because I used to have a nursery grown in deep water culture, so being able to understand that stomatal conductivity and being able to understand when we were increasing EC, like that was our way to crops here because you're not doing drybacks in deep water. We need to understand when the stomata is open, crank up the EC, right? It's transpiring, it's doing its thing. So it was fun. It's a living, breathing tool, and that's really what's thank you for touching on that because again, quantitative data, measuring the product solutions. So if you know that, I think we actually touched on Biomint a couple weeks ago when we were touching on, hey, I need 2 to 3 different products, and instead I'm going to spend a little bit more on this product, but it's got them all already in one.
But the thing about Biomend is less is more when it comes to that. So essentially you might be buying 3 different products so that you can inoculate with, 3 different ones that are in Biomend. And you spend a little bit more money on the Biomend, but your application rate is actually less than it would be when you use these other products.
What is it, like 0.1 grams per gallon? I mean, it's ridiculous.
It's super low.
Yeah, it depends on if it's a maintenance application or if it's a charging or loading application. Right. But yeah, I mean, basically, you want to have a microbe that's commercial grade for what we're doing, especially if you're running a facility that's 10,000 square feet or bigger. There are cuter versions out there that are, like 1 million CFUs per gram in a powder, but you really need in a concentrated powder, if you're going to spray an acre, which is what our product is meant to do, is spray acreage, is what we invented it for, was you can't be putting 50 pounds down for an acre. It's got to be something precise. So when we're working with, I can't name drop, but we're working with big pomegranate and avocado farmers, they're going to be using less than a pound per acre because of how they're applying it. They're going to apply it a few times a year. But if you have it in too low of a CFU count, you can't really push that tiny amount of powder into the whole acre.
That's a great point. Thank you, guys. What other questions? The question was, when do you stop foliar spraying? Kevin, do you want to touch on this?
Sure. I think the plant will tell you that first, and pistil production and bud production. I usually use as oils. I usually stop oils sooner. So usually by day 14-ish, I'm stopping my oils. If it's a green aminos spray, then or a biostimulant spray, I'll push it a few days past that. But I typically stop most foliar by about day 18 is kind of where I see that sweet spot. And then, if I'm using something like Biomend as continuous, which is what we'll do with the high shield, on like a weekly rotation, I'm still actually foliar applying those, but I'm using the auto fog instead, which is a dry fog. So you're not going to have the pistil disruption, and you're still getting that protection on the plant.
Yeah, if it's just a pure microbial spray or fog, you're not going to really have any pistil burning or pistil attenuation or anything like that your people obviously get worried about. It's really the other compounds or chemical ingredients that can cause that. So you could, a lot of people will use Biomend to prevent, I'm not legally allowed to say it in front of the EPA, but powdery mildew, mold botrytis, things like that, because that's going to happen as you keep going, right? And so botrytis is going to start forming early on, but you can miss it, and then if you don't continually keep going, it's going to keep growing inside the intercellular walls. So,
great question. Thank you. What other questions? All right. So we talked about our purpose. We talked about the process by using some tools and wonderful solutions. Now, what's the payoff? We're turning up the terps. That's all we're trying to do, guys. We're just trying to grow better quality flower. Quality is going to be an investment, right? If you're just growing in a sterile environment with your mineral swap program, good luck. I don't know what else to say. This market is brutal, and the cannabis industry is going through a lot of evolutional changes right now. You're going to start seeing some brands fall off very quickly because there's just the retailers. There's a lot of opportunity in the retail space to I'm not gonna go down that rabbit hole, but the retail market is very challenged. There's a lot of regulations that limit their ability to do what we need to do. The opportunities for how many licenses we have just alone here in California versus the amount of dispensaries. How do you separate yourself? Even with your bulk buyers, how do you separate yourself from a bulk buyer coming around?
Why don't you tell them what you think the target terpenes should be at for them to have a high grade product?
So, working with Nate at Bel Costa over the years, anything that's above 2.5% is not common. So 2.5% or above is less than 10% of overall test results. Now the plant has genetic potential to go up to what, 5% plus?
5% plus, yeah. I mean, you kind of push the limits on certain plants at that point, but we have strains and we've submitted tests for California that are above 5.01. One of them was a Pink Certs. Pink Certs was like 4.99 on a bunch of them, but then we've got a 5.01 before, but that could have been, an error. But we typically get with a Synganic or a full organic program, but like a Synganic program, I think people should be pushing to 3. 3 is a place where I think that everyone should be at.
Now, Mark, I have a question, because is there a possibility that with all these biostimulants, all these different microbes that we're adding in, could that potentially bring down total terpene levels and actually increase something else that we may not be measuring, such as thiols or flavonoids or some other components that the plant is synthesizing that may impact lower terpene numbers?
I haven't really seen a Synganic program or a program that's effectively done that's ever going to lower terpenes. What I've seen is the variation of different terpenes expressed differently. So whereas you've seen some plants that they might have really high myrcene or really high lemonol or whatever it is, but you didn't see this other one that was high all of a sudden creeps up a little bit more, or one that creeps up even more than you thought it would. So you're going to see the diversity of the terpene profile change sometimes.
Okay, fair.
I agree with that, actually. So I've actually seen that with the same cultivar, right, grown with a line that gave cardboard terps, and implementing a more Synganic approach and having really rare terpenes be expressed. Yeah. And somebody coming to me like, I don't see osamine very often. How'd you guys get that to be expressed,
Yeah, it's definitely biostimulant, but some microbes. And it's really, I try to break it down as simply as possible because the science hasn't caught up to it yet, but language. You have a certain microbe that's going to somehow push that plant to release that. And it could be from an enzyme profile that microbe's releasing, or it could be from a metabolite, it could be from who knows what. But it's going to force that plant to now speak a new language.
That's fascinating. Thank you. Anything else that you guys like to add? No? The Synganic Revolution continues. This has been the Foliar applications version. We've done a lot of these Synganic conversations over the past several months. These will continue, and there's a purpose behind it, guys. This is not, we don't have time to wait. If you're just growing with straight minerals, salt mineral programs, and you're just growing in a sterile environment, I pray for you. This is not an easy time to go through right now, so we need to be able to touch on these things again. There's so many products out there, and it's very difficult to actually know what to use. And hopefully, we're not up here trying to sell product solutions. We're trying to educate on the things that work, because we're just right down the street, and we've got lights that are rocking. We're doing a lot of R&D. So thank you guys for coming out to the Power Plant Tour. There's some familiar faces that came today, so thank you for making the time to see what we got going on. And that's the whole purpose of the PowrHouse facility. We have visitors, and that's the main purpose, is for us to show what we have in practice. And again, the PowrHouse is not perfect. We are continuously evolving with innovations and challenging our supplier partners to get better. And that's what we're doing. We have to give candid feedback, but there's a kindness approach to what we have to do. Right? Nobody wants to work with people that are just going to keep badgering. We have to bring solutions. Anytime you bring me a problem, I want to know what the solution is with it. So let's talk creatively. Let's be cohesive. Shout out to Endorse and Hydro for having us back here. This is the home of the Connect. We're super proud to be back here. Kevin, always appreciate you having us, brother. But you see all these brands on this backdrop up here, guys. There's no secret. We work very closely to all these brands. So thank you to everybody that's part of the Connect community. We're going to keep evolving. We've got a planned event every single month this year. So again, we really appreciate you guys coming out to support. Thank you so much for all of our panelists. Round of applause for our panelists, please. And until next time, appreciate you guys. This is Sergio the Custodian. Much love. We'll see you soon. Thank you.